Then, using a hammer, the rear axle tube came off. Next, the technician took the axle tube to the lathe, fixed it on the chuck, and used a cutting tool to process it. Meanwhile, another technician was preparing the replacement axle tube by cutting it to the required size with a reciprocating saw. Yes, seeing this saw, you might think of the big-eyed uncle, but this is actually his repair shop, because in all of Peshawar, he's the only one with this reciprocating saw. Once the axle tube was cut, the technician took it to the rear axle for fitting. It was clear that the size didn't quite match, but this is nothing new for the experienced Pakistani technicians. The technician pulled out a hydraulic jack to cut the axle tube. Using a cutting method, he hammered it to adjust the tube's size to fit the required dimensions. After the adjustments, the technician rechecked, and it was clear that the tube now met the requirements. Next, the technician used welding equipment to weld the joints to make it into a round axle tube. After welding, the tube was fixed onto the lathe, where the technician used a cutting to smooth out the weld seams. This is to prepare the tube for installation into the rear axle. After the machining, the technician also completed the processing of the broken axle. Processing was done. The axle sleeve was then fitted inside the axle tube. The technician welded the inside to reinforce the axle tube. After welding, the parts were ready to be reassembled onto the rear axle. The technician used a large hammer to install the axle tube into the rear axle. This process is crucial to ensure the dimensions are accurate at both ends. During the hammering process, the technician constantly measured the dimensions with calipers. Once the tube was correctly positioned, the technician used a custom tool to ensure the axle tube was concentric and aligned. If there were any slight deviations, he would hammer them back into alignment. Once the alignment was confirmed, the technician proceeded to weld to ensure the overall repair quality. The technician used a 507 welding rod. Only with this welding rod could the rear axle achieve the necessary strength. The welding was completed. The seams were perfectly welded together. The technician cleaned off the welding slag with a tool. Next, using an angle grinder, the technician smoothed out the welds to make the surface look more polished. Afterward, the rear axle was completely repaired. It was truly impressive. Kudos to the Pakistani technicians for their amazing skills. Next, it was installed back on the truck. The question remains, which weighs more, 100 or 100 tons of cotton? Feel free to share your. Which one weighs more, 100 or 100 tons of cotton? Feel free to comment and discuss.